Welcome to the Tuesday Pitcher Nail Down. I'm Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. With me is Russell Clay at Russell J Clay, and we're taking a look at our technically our third slate of the year so far for MLB, and looking at pitching. It's not too intriguing tonight. There are a couple of guys that are in some good spots as far as wins go, but with all the aces going yesterday and some guys in the early slate, guys like Price Kluber, Keiko Tanaka. You're looking at tonight's slate, and it's not too appealing as far as guys on the bump.
Definitely doesn't have the same sort of charge as the day before, but that's to be expected with sort of all the aces going on the day before. But yeah, and we're dealing with some crazy snow right now and some crazy delays and stuff. Not expected for our opening day celebrations, but hey, we're going to get through it, right?
Yeah, I mean, me and you were both mass guys, and we both woke up with nearly a foot of snow, and nothing says opening day like a foot of snow. But you look at Cleveland and Boston yesterday, and postponed, not for snow, not for rain, just for strictly being cold. I don't know what the deal was, but
sports in 2016.
Yeah, I put on your hoodies and put your jersey over it and get out there. This is come on, give me a break.
All right, so let's get into the matchups here. What do you think of this Cardinals-Pirates game? Over-under of 7.5, and Pittsburgh's favored -104. Michael Wacha versus John Neese. Do you see an advantage here, or is it sort of – what are you thinking about this matchup?
This one's kind of a toss-up for me, and Vegas is on the same lines. And you look at the Cardinals, and they struggled against left-handed pitching last season. The strikeout rate was high. They were bottom 5 in WRC plus. And I think Neese is not a great pitcher at all. Pretty subpar. I think he's going to be helped out by PNC just a little bit. I don't think a quality start is out of the question for him. I think his price considered, it makes him a decent, option as an SP2 on DK. I won't be touching him on FanDuel. On the other side, Michael Wacha, a little bit more appealing as far as fantasy points go, but it's not an ideal matchup against the Pirates. I think, you're looking at Wacha, pretty average as far as strikeout rate goes. I don't see much appeal in this game in general in comparison to some of the other guys.
Yeah, so probably just one you want to stay away from for the most part, unless you're trying to be a little contrarian.
Yeah, I think the value with Neese isn't too bad on DK. More so in tournaments if you're looking to kind of pay up with your hitters.
Right. Next one we're looking at here, Tigers versus Marlins. 7.5 over under. Detroit -110. So another pretty straightforward pick'em type matchup. Verlander versus Chen. What do you think about that one?
This one I'm a little bit surprised as far as Vegas goes. We kind of expect the Tigers to be favored a little bit more. Looking at those right-handed bats with Detroit, Cabrera, Kinsler, Upton, JD Martinez, those guys are going to be a pretty tough out for Chen. I think the move to Miami is going to be pretty beneficial for him, but I don't think I'll be jumping him on here on his first start. And I kind of anticipate them jumping on him and getting a few runs for Verlander. And Verlander, we're kind of hoping's in that bounce back spot. It was decent towards the end of last season. Had a 21% K strikeout rates over 2015. Definitely below his career averages. He's been kind of trended down. But overall, I don't mind him in tournaments. I don't necessarily mind him in cash games as well. It's a decent park out there in Miami, but I think just because of the slate, it kind of puts him into an above average play tonight.
Right, and in terms of Chen, there's a lot of guys around his sort of range, so it's not like you're necessarily getting an advantage in terms of salary cap relief. So maybe not the guy to look at tonight.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the guys around they're way more intriguing than Chen in this matchup against Detroit.
Right. So next, Tampa Bay is favored over the Blue Jays, -125, over under of 8. So we're getting a little further up there than the first two games. Rosie ZZZZ versus Aaron Sanchez. What do you think about that matchup?
Yeah. If you haven't picked up from our previous pods, Russell's name recognition's a little off at times.
Victor Olapido was
Yes, he's pulled
one of
that
my
one.
famous ones. That
As far as that game goes, yes, you're starting to creep up into the over/under, and obviously, targeting the a Jays offense is not ideal. They ranked number one against right-handed pitching last season. Odorizzi, I mean, he can struggle to keep the ball in the yard at times. Um, it's one of those matchups where these guys might fly on a different slate in a different matchup, but in this one going up against Toronto, it's a pretty easy fade for me. Just like you said, I mean, you kind of look at some of the guys priced around him, and it's not too appealing. Guys like Jose Quintana, even Miller, I'd take a shot lower. But Sanchez there, coming off a pretty decent spring, he got the rotation start. The Rays aren't an appealing offense against right-handed pitching. We've seen that so far in the first two games. I think he's definitely worth a look in tournaments. I'm still not going to trust his floor in cash games, though.
right, super cheap on DraftKings, but maybe not necessarily in that range to trust yet.
Yeah.
Looking at next here, Mariners versus Rangers. Texas minus 117, 8.5 over under. Iwakuma versus Perez. You see anything intriguing in that matchup?
Just for my hitters, really. I mean, that's where I'll probably be heading towards offense. 8.5 total. That's pretty significant. It's usually one that you kind of stay away from. Iwakuma, I mean, another year older. He struggled a lot keeping the ball in yard at times last season, but was better towards the end of the year. I won't be targeting him against this Texas team, and I'll definitely be targeting a few guys actually against him instead. And kind of the same goes for Perez. I mean, the Seattle lefties are really appealing in today's matchup against him.
So, but he does have some pretty intriguing advanced stats, but is that not something that necessarily takes into account the matchup for him in this one?
Yeah, I don't think it's enough to outweigh a matchup against Texas.
Right.
You look at the Rangers; they were top 10 last season against right-handed pitching in WOBA, weighted runs created plus, ISO as well. And being at home in that friendly park of theirs, maybe in a matchup at Safeco out there in Seattle where he's a little bit better, you take him into consideration. But he's going to be a pretty viable option, price considered as the year goes on, but not yet.
Mm-hmm. So wait it out for today. Yeah. Giants versus Brewers, Johnny Cueto versus Jimmy Nelson. One of the more significant lines tonight, San Francisco minus 133, over under of 8. So a little less than the last one, but do any of these guys intrigue you?
Cueto's going to be one that I'm probably keeping an eye on, and I think he's going to probably be one of the chalkier plays tonight. And I necessarily wouldn't call him a safe option in comparison to maybe on a different slate. But I think because that line favors the Giants, you're looking at the Giants facing another average pitcher on the hill. I think he gets his run support there. I mean, Cueto's a guy who really fell off after going to the AL last season, expected to be kind of a bounce back guy this year, moving to AT&T Park with the Giants, better defense around him, got Posey behind the plate. Kind of an up and down spring as well. I'll be kind of keeping my eye on him actually pretty close as the early months here to see if any trends from 2015 continue. But looking at the matchup with the Brewers, I mean, they really struggled against right-handed pitching last season, and not much has changed from the lineup from last year. They boasted a 21.4% strikeout rate, an 88 WRC plus against right-handers. So this is a pretty favorable matchup for Cueto, and one that he can definitely get off to the right start on for 2016. So I'll be locking him in kind of in all formats because his price isn't too bad.
That makes sense. And yeah, again, we don't have a lot of sample size on this season, but when you kind of look into some of the prior years and stuff, it tends to make a little more sense for Cueto right now.
Yeah.
Diamondbacks, Rockies, Arizona, pretty big favorite here, minus 159, over under of 8.5. So are we looking at Shelby Miller here as sort of a legitimate option tonight, or is that something you're not really considering?
To pick up a W, I think he's, it's a likely factor. Arizona's the highest favorites of tonight, so if you're banking on a W, it would be Miller by default. Um, Obviously, a matchup against Colorado isn't ideal, even though they are outside of cores. But Arizona, it's a friendly ballpark. We saw last night Greinke struggle with the adjustment there, and I think it could be similar lines to that for Shelby Miller tonight. And I think that's one that, yeah, the home and away splits are pretty solid for Colorado as far as picking on them on the road. But looking at Miller, average K percentage. He struggles walking guys at times, 8.5% walk rate last year. So it is a little bit concerning, even though Colorado's offense can, drop duds every now and then. But I still think it's a risky call to take him on this slate.
Fair enough.
And Bettis is completely off the grid. There's no way.
Yeah, I wasn't even going to bring him up. Yeah, I don't. Regardless of the format or pretty much anything, you're not really looking at him.
Yeah.
So John Lester going up against the Angels tonight. Cubs are favored, over under of 7.5. But as the top valued guy of the night, is he someone you're considering with sort of lower options than a normal night?
Yeah, and I think he's another guy that's everyone kind of carries some sort of risk on tonight's slate, and I think Lester's another one. The Cubs are favored. I do see the offense kind of getting to Heaney a little bit here. Lester, he's a decent strikeout guy. We saw that last season, 25% strikeout rate. The walk rate was solid. Struggles with, obviously, the throws over to first and guys running on him. Not too many options in this Angels team that are going to steal a base. Obviously, a couple up front. I don't think Lester's a bad option. I think a quality start's definitely in line with about 6 Ks or so. The Angels they weren't too great against left-handed pitching last season. Ranked 24th in WOBA against lefties. The strikeout rate was a little bit below, so they didn't strike out a ton, but. Really, I think Lester, the only thing that gives me a knock against him is that price tag, but there's just not a lot of options up top.
Right. So kind of looking at maybe a tournament play for him, not necessarily trusting in cash.
Yeah, I think I rather lean on guys like Cueto, and then we'll get to a couple other guys here in a minute, just because there's just a pretty big salary difference, and I think their outcomes come the end of the night are going to be pretty similar.
Okay. Looking at another 10 o'clock West Coast game, White Sox versus A's, Sonny Gray versus Jose Quintana. See anyone getting an advantage there in that matchup?
Well, the one thing that's going to be pretty favorable for Sonny Gray is he was scratched yesterday's slate from pitching up against Chris Sale. He had food poisoning, and for some reason it's like the third time he's had it in the last 2 years, which is kind of odd. But Gray's going to get an advantage of not facing Quayle. He's not going to face the other team's ace. And Quintana has been a guy who's been up and down at times, but kind of balances himself out over the course of the season. But you can struggle early on in time. He's pitching in the Coliseum. It's one of the better pitchers parks in the game. You look at the A's there, they're pretty average offense against left-handed pitching as far as scoring runs go, but I think Quintana's a pretty safe guy for cash. I don't think he's going to burn you, especially going up against this lineup in this stadium.
So you would say the food poisoning for Quintana is kind of like the dehydration for J.R. Smith.
Yeah. It's except for some reason, Sonny Gray is not hungover. I don't see him being hungover. I just see he legitimately had food poisoning, or maybe he's that kind of guy. Maybe he's a party animal. I don't know.
Yeah.
But Gray, on the other side, I think Gray's an interesting play tonight. He's not the sexiest fantasy producer, but you look at the White Sox; they do have a much improved offense. They added Todd Frazier this year, so you're definitely going to get a bump up from them. Still, you look at the White Sox last season, they ranked in the bottom 10 Their K percentage was around the league average. This is a matchup where Gray can put up decent numbers, but I just think at that price tag, I'll probably be looking to pass. And he's not a for sure start. We could also see Chris Bassett get a start, but it looks like Sonny Gray is going to be giving it a go.
Right. And the last 10 o'clock game, the lowest over-under of the night, Dodgers favored, minus 133, Scott Kazmir versus James Shields. Shields, two of the more expensive players on the slate in terms of pitchers. So what are you looking at here?
Yeah, you got Kazmir here, sitting at 9,300 on FanDuel. Much better price, 8,300 on DK there. And I'm looking at Kazmir as being the safer cash game option, safer guy in all formats. He's obviously no Kershaw, but we saw Kershaw dominate the Padres, yesterday. And the Padres are just going to be a team to pick on all season. They ranked 23rd in offense against left-handed pitching last season and boasted a 23% strikeout rate. Dodgers are pretty strong favorites as far as team goes. Shields, though, an interesting GPP play just because the strikeout rate was high last season, and he boasted a pretty high swinging strike percentage. Obviously, it's not an ideal matchup, but you're looking at Shields as a 25% strikeout rate guy, and as long as he can keep the ball in the yard this season, which I think he'll definitely trend down compared to last year, he'll be all right, but definitely more reserved for tournaments because that 6.5 total is pretty attractive as far as looking at pitchers.
Right. So again, at that mid 8K range for Kazmir, sort of intriguing there on DK.
Yeah, he definitely just fits right in, especially on DK with that 2 pitchers.
Right.
He's an easy guy to kind of pair up with Cueto. So that's going to wrap things up here with the pitcher nail down, and good luck to all you guys on our third baseball slate of the day, and check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all our great tools and content.